Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
She immediately turned to jump, a probably futile chase, but instead was forced to dodge to the side when a tendril of shadow attacked her. He turned to see Shikamaru standing on a tree branch, his hands still on the final seal of his Kagemain no Jutsu. He sighed, "It's problematic, but your opponent is me." For the long moments after the explosion, Kiba knew nothing but confusion and the relentless pull of gravity. Akun held Kamaru against his chest as he fell down, desperately using several stony crags protruding from the side of the ravine to slow his fall. The fall seemed to last 4 hours, although I knew rationally that it couldn't have lasted more than a second or two. Then he landed, feeling relief and disbelief at the same time that he was able to get out of the fall unscathed. He set Kamaru down on the ground and looked around, finding himself under a ledge formed by the cliff above him. The ceiling, the wall and the floor were made of stone, and not far away there was a fast-flowing river. He did not see his opponent, and for a moment dared to hope that he had not survived the fall, that his lifeless body was hanging from the boulders protruding from the walls of the ravine above him. Then he caught a trace of Saken's scent as he descended towards the ground. The Otonin landed half a second later, looking at Kiba and Kamaru with a predatory gaze. Then he lunged at Kiba, fists raised to strike. But the young Inuzuka had not been taken by surprise. The moment he noticed Saken's smell, he gave Kamaru a soldier pill and started showing some familiar hand seals. It was two Kaibas that started moving at the same time as Saken. They launched into a countercharge, extending slightly at the last minute for Saken to pass between them. It was a textbook-perfect flank maneuver, and Kiva wasn't planning on wasting the opportunity. Both Kivas attacked, their blows imbued with the ruthlessness their clan was known for. They both kept track of their hits. They both knew that some of them overcame Saken's defenses. However, when they walked away from him while his momentum was running out, they could see that he was completely unharmed. Kiba and Akamaru exchanged quick glances, reaching a tacit agreement before launching forward once more. But this time, there was a new twist in his accusation, literally. The two jumped up, turning sideways with the familiar movements of their Katsuga. They saw that Saken's eyes opened slightly, and some prepared to move. But they already knew it was too late. They had seen him perform before, and had a rough idea of his speed and skill level. They knew there was no way a man of their skill level could escape this attack unscathed. Therefore, it was a complete surprise when Kiva felt two hands grab his, stopping his attack in its tracks. He expected to see himself looking at Saken's face, now covered by strange black marks. But the surprise came when he looked past Saken and saw another head with an identical lock of grayish hair, another torso, and another pair of arms that kept the ninja hound at bay. "Kyuk." Saken smiled before answering. "Yukon and I are pretty unique brothers. Usually, he resides inside of me. But when he comes to the battle, I can't deny him the opportunity to have fun." She laughed slightly as she squeezed Kiva's wrists more tightly. "It's a pity that you won't be able to keep us entertained for long." Saken changed as he spoke. The marks expanded to cover the entirety of his skin and turned color. Dark red. A horn sprouted from his head. One of his legs and one of his arms were covered with overlapping black and silver plates. But the most immediate concern was the sudden increase in strength that the Otonin was enjoying. And Kiva could feel the bones in his wrist getting ready to break, purse under the pressure. Then he saw an orange-yellow flash at the edges of his vision. Yujito was descending directly on top of Saken Yukon, his fist raised to strike, and the telltale glow of Chikara no Toremu outlining his limbs. Kiva felt that pressure on his wrists. He loosened up, heard the crack of Yujito's fist as he connected, felt the stone crumple under his feet, and saw the tremendous cloud of dust raised by Yujito's attack. He was looking around as the dust settled, noticing the now separated figures of Sakan and Yukon as they put on their skins again. His gaze drifted to Kiba and offered him a smile. "Sorry for getting in late, but I had to take my time to go down that ravine. They say a cat always lands on its feet, but it's not exactly something I'd want to test you on." "To know." A sad smile spread across Kiba's face. "Saved by a cat. If my clan finds out about this, I'll never get over it." Shikamaru looked at Tayuya cautiously as he took out a flute that seemed to have been pierced by the rope belt he was wearing. When Shikamaru saw her biting her thumb, he jumped forward, but he couldn't do to reach her in time to prevent Tayuya from completing his jutsu. He slammed his bloody hand against the tree branch. "Kuchio sei no jutsu." Shikamaru reversed his direction when he saw the smoke appear around Tayuya. Invocations can be very dangerous, very powerful. He needed to make sure he had enough time to react to anything she brought to the battlefield. He was completely shocked when he saw 3 monstrous and deformed humanoids emerging from the cloud of smoke. I hadn't even heard of a summoning contract that invoked anything else more than an animal of some kind. However, he didn't have much time to think about it, as Tayuya put the flute to his lips and started playing. The ogres immediately jumped forward, their clubs raised to swing as they pounced on Shikamaru. The young shadow user jumped back, clearing the area a few seconds before a club reduced the branch he had been standing on to splinters. He squinted his eyes as he analyzed his situation. Golds were slow, and he would have no problem catching any of them with his cageman and ojutsu if he was alone. Unfortunately, there were 3 of them. To make matters worse, Tayuya seemed able to use his flute to keep the 3 of them moving in perfect coordination, or at least close enough to cover each other very well. He would have to own all 3 of them if he wanted to avoid being beaten by the rest. And to do that, he would have to figure out how Tayuya's song affected his movements, or take a chance and get lucky. The risks were problematic for him, so he resigned himself to dodging the forest with the ogres chasing him. The pattern held for quite some time. Tayuya proved to be quite adept at handling her ogres. They moved with excellent coordination, keeping enough distance between them so that he could not catch the 3 of them with his Kagemain no Jutsu. However, they were close enough that if he took the time to possess just one, another would be close enough to use the crumbled remains of his body to decorate the nearby trees. To make matters worse, there were always at least 2 between him and Tayuya. I wouldn't have a chance to attack until I could understand Tayuya's song. And unfortunately, I couldn't understand any of his notes or rhythms. Tayuya paused for a moment, lifting his lips from the flute and looking at Shikamaru. "You're a persistent little bastard. Most people are already dead, long before I need my last song. But no one heard this one and survived." Irregular black lines spread across his skin as he spoke, accompanied by a monstrous surge of chakra. Then, he put the flute to his lips and started playing again. Shikamaru looked at the golds askance as they opened their mouths and their stitches were stretched widely. Then, they jumped at him, and he prepared to dodge once more. But just as he was getting ready to jump, he saw something move inside his jaws. Then, a kind of ethereal tendril, topped with fanged jaws, spread out from each of the beasts. Shikamaru's eyes widened in surprise as the tendrils fell on him. He allowed himself to fall backwards off the branch, getting out of danger at the last moment. The tendrils pierced through the branch where he had just been standing and continued unhindered their way to him. He landed on a branch below him, not even bothering to position himself properly before desperately throwing himself once more. This time, one of the tendrils came close enough to graze him. The tip of one of them struck him on the knee, separating a ghostly representation of his leg from his real flesh. That ghostly representation was shattered, and Shikamaru felt a sudden fatigue in his leg. Then he was out of range and threw a puff of smoke to cover his retreat. He continued his retreat until he reached a decent distance between himself and those dangerous ogres. Then he crouched down. He made a small grimace at the burning sensation in his leg and the feeling of intense tiredness in it. Those tendrils were obviously ethereal in nature, given the way they passed through the branches of the trees so easily. And although they didn't seem to cause any physical damage, they were apparently perfectly capable of draining the spiritual bar physical strength. I would have to be even more careful with them now than before. The good thing, though, was that I was starting to identify the patterns in the fight. By observing Tayuya, he was able to start predicting the movements of his ogres, and that was key. He continued his retreat, zigzagging between trunks and branches. He watched Tayuya, watched the ogres, watched the patterns, and knew he had it. His foot hit a slippery patch of moss as he landed on the next branch, flying under him and throwing him on his back. Tayuya smiled, sending his golds to kill. And then they stopped. Success of Kaijimain no Jutsu. Tayuya almost dropped his flute in shock. I was about to win, I was sure of it. How the hell did you do that? There's no way you could figure out my tune. You're right, I couldn't follow your notes at all. However, your hands, each position of your fingers, corresponded with a certain movement or formation for those ogres of yours. It took me a while, but I figured it out. Then I simply had to attract them, and a perceived weakness often constitutes a good trap. Shikamaru straightened up, making the golds stand up too. He realized that, given their strength, they were quite easy to control, possibly because they were so used to being controlled. Oh well, he wasn't willing to complain. He channeled chakra to his feet and jumped, causing the three ogres to attack Tayuya. She smiled. There is only one problem with your plan. The ogres suddenly disappeared in a gigantic cloud of smoke. I refuse my summons whenever I feel like it. She smiled and decided that she would have to take a different approach to kill this pest. Deciding on his course of action, he put the flute to his lips, or at least tried to. A small smile appeared on Shikamaru's face. I told you, a perceived weakness is a good trap. That's true, whether it's a weakness in a person's defense or a weakness in a plan. I knew you would discard those things, so I used them as a distraction to allow me to capture you with my Kageman in Ojutsu. Now it's over. That's what you think, asshole. Even as she spoke, the marks on Tayuya's skin seemed to expand, taking on a reddish-brown color as they completely covered her. Horns also sprouted from his head, and he experienced a sudden increase in strength. That was what worried Shikamaru. He was completely dependent on his shadow techniques. If Tayuya was able to overpower them, and she was doing a good job resisting now, there would be a way for him to win the fight. He sighed. This was going to be problematic. Naruto kept his Shita active and not Toremu as he sped through the forest. He could feel the signature of Kimimara's chakra and knew that it was reaching him quickly. Kimimaro must have felt it, because he stopped in the middle of a clearing in a short time. It didn't take Naruto long to get there either. His bloodline was already deactivated when he landed on the edge of the clearing. Kimimaro was standing in the center of the clearing, the barrel containing Sasuke sitting on the ground behind him. Naruto stood still for a moment, looking at his new opponent. You can't leave me behind. If you hand me that barrel, I'll be willing to let you go without a fight. Kimimaro advanced 2 steps. I can't allow that. Sasuke will become the new recipient of Orochimaru-sama. Orochimaru-sama's goals and dreams depend on Sasuke reaching it safely, and I will do everything necessary to make sure that this is the case. Naruto's eyes narrowed, so be it. He lunged forward. Meguro noticed Rimu coming to life as he went. Kimimaro met him halfway, his robe falling back from his shoulder as he pulled out a bone sword. Naruto had half a second to realize that his opponent must have been a member of the supposedly extinct Kage clan. Before the two met, any viewer would have been surprised by the marked difference in styles between the two. Kimimaro's movements were smooth and fluid. He almost seemed to dance across the battlefield as his sword moved in the air, its edges searching for Naruto's flesh. Naruto's movements didn't seem to be that graceful. He was moving in short, sudden bursts, each one pulling him away from one of Kimimaro's punches or setting him up for one of his own. He also stayed close to the ground, using 3 or 4 limbs to support himself. and twice while throwing punches from seemingly impossible angles. The two jumped back again after a brief exchange, looking at each other askance. "Hokage, I had heard that your clan was extinct. Most of them are. I'm the only survivor. Orochimaru-sama saved me and gave my life a purpose. I was chosen to become their next recipient. But then I became terminally ill. Orochimaru-sama can no longer use fulfilling his dreams. I'll make sure he has Sasuke instead. He also wants your Kekai Henkai. He'll definitely be happy if I can bring them both back, although with Yujito out there, I doubt he'll mind. Too much if I killed you to bring Sasuke back." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly as he digested this new information. Teuya had clearly been surprised to see Kimimaro. He had thought that there was something preventing him from fighting. A terminal illness, Naruto reflected, might well have explained Teuya's reaction. Having finished his reflections, Naruto was about to respond to Kimimaro's last statement, when he felt a sudden surge of disgusting chakra. He looked towards the barrel and saw the chakra seeping out of it. The seals along the barrel lid opened in quick succession, and then the lid flew out of the barrel in a puff of smoke. Still, Naruto saw a figure jumping out of the barrel, and his eyes followed Sasuke as he stopped on the grassy floor of the clearing. The Uchiha was different. The disgusting chakra of the seal seemed to be more penetrating, as if it was completely integrated into his chakra system. But that wasn't the only change. Sasuke's skin had turned a sickly gray color, his hair lengthened until it hung halfway down his back, and turned a strange purplish color. But the change was only temporary. Lucia's hair returned to its normal shade and color even as her strange skin tone receded, changing to the markings Naruto had come to identify with the seal before disappearing completely. Naruto and Kimimaro started moving at the same instant. Chakra sprouted from Naruto's skin, forming his Manter Uno Toremo, even as he recomposed it to coil chakra and attack Sasuke. Kimimaro moved to the side, placing himself between the two younger shinobi. He completely stripped off the top of his robe as he ran, and the mark of his seal quickly spread across his skin. Then he stood up, raised his sword above his head, and brought it whistling towards Naruto. To Kimimaro's great surprise, Naruto simply raised his hand and caught the descending sword. The wind chakra surrounding his claws cut small grooves on the edge, quickly widening them enough for Naruto's fingers to wrap around the sword safely. He immediately took advantage of Kimimaro's surprise, turning the blade down and to the side, while his other hand was raised, to cut the user's face of bone. Kimimaro simply leaned back, letting Naruto's claws pass within a fraction of an inch of his face, before getting back into an upright position. But I had underestimated the young Kumonin. Naruto jumped into the air, steadying himself with his grip on Kimimaro's sword. Kimimaro and doing a somersault in the air. As soon as Kimimaro straightened up, the claws of Naruto's foot reached him in the face. His head was thrown back by the force of the impact as he stumbled backwards. Naruto simply pulled the sword to get closer, and his second foot cut the side of Kimimaro's head. Only then did he let go, landing lightly on his feet as he turned to face his opponent. Kimimaro's face was half covered by what appeared to be a thick white mass. Bone, Naruto thought, brought to the surface of the skin and used as armor. It was also quite effective, as everything had to be to resist the extraordinary edge that the wind chakra gave to its claws. Still, it wasn't a total loss. Naruto could see the deep indentations in the bone as it recoiled under Kimimaro's skin. The makeshift armor can absorb his blows, but Naruto could get through it. If Kimimaro didn't have enough time to make the armor thick enough, his claws could pierce through it. Kimimaro frowned as he looked at the badly cut sword in his hand before dropping it to the ground. There was only one other time in his life when he had fought against someone who could damage his bones so severely, and that had been Yondaime Kazekage himself. Now he could see why Orochimaru was so interested in the boy, and he was also more convinced than ever of his decision to leave and take Sasuke to Orochimaru. He could hasten his death, but he doubted that the Uchiha would have been able to overcome the Araki. Sasuke continues to Otagakure. What about Naruto? I'll take care of him. Fine. Sasuke bent his knees, preparing to jump away. A word was made to him. However, when Naruto's voice invaded him, "Run fast, Sasuke, and run far. Because once I'm done with this guy, I'm coming for you, and we both know how it's going to end." There was no swagger in Naruto's tone, no threat. The words were spoken with the strange calm of who knows that what he says is true. And that scared Sasuke more than he would ever admit. The young Uchiha jumped into the forest, silently hoping that Kimimaro could defeat an Araki Naruto. Yujito chuckled, "You'll feel sorry for being saved by a cat, huh? I'll tell you one thing. Make sure I only have to do my own weight, and I won't tell them about it. Deal? So what's the plan?" Yujito's eyes narrowed as he watched his opponents, quickly coming to his conclusion. With a skill like that, they're obviously used to fighting in tandem. Our taijutsu styles may be similar, but we've never fought together before. We need to separate them, divide them, and fight them 1-on-1. Or in your case, 1 against 2. Understood? Let's go, Akamaru. The couple jumped forward. Akamaru jumped into the air almost immediately, twisting in the Gotsuga technique characteristic of the Inuzuka clan. Saken and Yukon had been thinking along the same lines as Yujito, and they stuck together as they jumped away from the attack. Then Yujito was in front of them, Shida and not Toremu disappearing from his skin as he approached melee range. She bent sharply at the waist, one fist hissing within a hair's breadth of her face. He continued his backward momentum, getting upright as a next axe kick crashed to the stone floor. She propelled herself, jumped in the air and spun. Chikara no Toremu came to life once again as his foot came down with his own axe kick. Saken and Yukon had already seen the enormous strength that her bloodline could give her and had no desire to take a hit, while she had so much power. They jumped away, having plenty of time to dodge the blow. It was just what Kiba had been waiting for. He ran forward, entering his own Gotsuga as he attacked the twins. The twins were trapped in the air and had only 2 options left. And accepting the blow of Kiba's Gotsuga was not an option at all. Therefore, they were forced to push against each other, separating just before Kiba's attack split the air between them. Yukon landed in a squat and skated to a stop. He was shifting his weight, getting ready to run towards Saken when Yujito appeared in front of him. She shot him a grim smile, "No way." Then she lunged forward, and Yukon had to focus all his concentration on the cruel hand-to-hand combat that followed. He could barely dodge Yujito's initial blow and dodged his spinning kick by barely a few millimeters. His retaliatory blow struck him on the shoulder, but it had been anticipated. Yujito had already begun to spin, absorbing the impact and turning it into centrifugal force. That strength, in turn, was transferred to his goal kick. His heel hit Yukon in the stomach, bending him and making him skate on the stony ground. He took the opportunity to look at Kiba. I had Saken in a desperate situation. He was surrounding Lotanen along with Akamaru. His fast and speedy movements prevented the older shinobi from reading his movements accurately. They would come in and out at random intervals, attacking their enemy with their claws. Saken was completely on the defensive, barely able to avoid the cutting claws of his enemies. Together, the twins were formidable. Separated, they were vulnerable. Separated, they were overcome. And they knew it. If they didn't do something soon, this fight would be pretty much over. Saken and Yukon weren't the only ones in trouble. Shikamaru had called his boss Kubashibari no Jutsu to help him in his confrontation with Tayuya. Despite the extra help he brought, the incredible strength of Tayuya's level 2 form was still mastering his shadow techniques. I knew that if I couldn't contain it, I had no chance, but I also knew that I needed to release the technique or risk depleting the chakra. So it was with great relief that Tayuya felt the shadows moving away from her. He wasted no time in taking the flute to his lips, and another of his lethal melodies filled the air once again. Shikamaru was getting ready to move when the world suddenly changed around him. The colors seemed to change, swirling and changing as the forest disappeared from view around them. He was immediately hit by the waves, disorientation and vertigo, as he lost his sense of direction. Up and down, distance, left and right. Suddenly none of that had any meaning. He made his chakra fluctuate, trying to dispel the illusion without success. Then I was lost. I had no sense of direction, no perspective. It was enough to mentally overwhelm even his vast intellect. He was starting to panic when his mind took over something. His shadows, the jutsu he had used while trying to restrain Teyuya, were still active. He wasted little time moving the tendrils and fiddling with them. It wasn't long before he felt one of the tendrils brushing against his leg. She wrapped it around her leg, moving it up and wrapping it around her whole body. He gave a sigh of relief when he suddenly regained his sense of direction. The genjutsu had given him the feeling that he was spinning randomly through space. But his shadows had to originate on a solid surface, and the added assurance that his feet were firmly planted allowed him to break through the first layer of the genjutsu. He still couldn't move or gather information about his surroundings, nor could he fluctuate his chakra flow enough to break the genjutsu. But with his sense of direction restored, his reasoning came back to him. And it wasn't as if there weren't other ways to break a genjutsu. He forcefully repressed a grunt of pain as he used his shadows to snap a finger with a sickening crack. As intense as the pain of a broken finger may have been, fortunately it was brief. Anyway, the worst would soon pass, and he had more important things to worry about. A good example is Teyuya's level 2 form, just 4 feet away from him, and getting closer. She spread her shadows once more, wrapping them around her even as her hand stole a cradle and from its cover. He grabbed her by the wrist with one hand, striving to keep her at bay, even when her shadows exerted their own influence. And it was working. His movements slowed down even when he lifted the kunari. And then they stopped, leaving the two of them fighting each other in a deadly embrace. Mikage Kubishibari no Jutsu, panting Shikamaru, is stronger the less distance he has to travel to reach the target. The last part of his statement was silent in the air, but both shinobi understood it quite well. So let's see if you can break it now. Hand-to-hand combat, Naruto surmised, was simply not a viable option against Kimimaro after the last Kagaya activated his seal. Tora Muyuki may have made him very suitable for such a fight, but Kimimaro made him much more suitable. With the help of the seal, he proved to be able to sprout bones from every square centimeter of his body at will. And they were extremely sharp and durable. If Naruto were to continue in his attempt to take Kimimaro hand in hand, he would end up cut into strips. Trapped in a bone trap, or trapped in any other fate he would rather not insist on. Even the Rasengan wasn't much help in this situation, as Kimimaro was simply able to extend some bone spikes to intercept the attack. Sure, the Rasengan reduced the bones to dust, but it was also spent on doing so, leaving Naruto exposed to the counterattacks of the bone bearers. Learning that had almost cost Naruto his hand, and, to tell the truth, he wasn't entirely sure if he would grow back or not. I didn't want to know either. Naruto jumped back, throwing his hands up as he accelerated through a rapid series of stamps. Kimimaro naturally chased after him in an attempt to maintain the hand-to-hand combat in which he had a clear advantage. Unfortunately for him, that was a contingency that Naruto had taken into account. He had used the simplest Furuten Jutsu that existed, and Kimimaro had no chance to dodge the Datopa to burn. Close. Shida and not Toremu activated, allowing Naruto to quickly put a lot more distance between him and Kimimaro, as his hands blurred across a set of stamps. Futon Furyuden. The first time Naruto used this jutsu against Orochimaru, a lower price had happened to him. It required extremely precise chakra control, or it would wreak havoc even on his vast chakra reserves. So I had spent a lot of time perfecting the technique since then, and the process of mastering the Rasengan did wonders with the chakra control. He had finally brought down the Rasengan while fighting Gaara, and then had made sure that the Furyuden also benefited from his new control. As a result, This Furyuden was easily the most powerful one he had ever produced. The wind dragon turned in the air and opened its mouth as if to roar as it approached its target. Kimimaro stood up just in time to see the technique approaching him. He didn't have time to convert to his level 2 form, so he quickly started growing his bones and prayed that it would be enough. Then the dragon struck. Naruto's vision instantly darkened, and a huge cloud of dust rose up as soon as the technique pierced through the wooded ground. It was a while before the dust settled enough for Naruto to see anything, and when he did, he let out a hiss of disbelief. The nearby trees had disappeared, they had simply disappeared. And the rush that was falling through the clearing like snow gave a good indication of what had happened to them. He could see a bony hemisphere in the area. And it wasn't until he realized that he was too small to hold Kimimaro that he realized that he must have been resting in a crater. That was already being filled by the earth and the ironclad that his Furyuden had raised. Even from this distance he could see the deep cuts covering the scarred surface of the dome, and for a second, he wondered if his attack had reached the man below. There was no such luck. The outer layer of the dome peeled off, separating and revealing Kimimaro standing inside. Naruto absently noticed that the crater was deep enough to reach Kagaya's chest, but most of his attention was focused elsewhere. That is, the various unpleasant-looking cuts that cover the young bone user. His attack had succeeded, but Kimimaro had been able to form a shield, strong enough to absorb most of the damage. What he had managed to get through wasn't even lethal. Naruto made a face. The Furyuden was the attack most likely to break Kimimaro's defenses with a single blow. And he needed to get through them in one fell swoop, or Kimimaro would have enough time to develop more bones to stop him. Of course, if he kept throwing Furyudens at the Kagaya, he would eventually manage to kill him. But that wasn't exactly a practical option. It took a lot of hand seals to shoot that dragon, which gave Kimimaro enough time to react. Not to mention that it was a movement that required a lot of chakra. Even with his vast reserves, Naruto couldn't pull much. A lot of things without running out, and then I wouldn't be in a position to locate or fight with Sasuke. He suppressed a sigh. This was not an ideal situation. Yukon soon realized that he would not be able to beat Yujito in a direct taijutsu fight. She was simply too skilled for him to take her, without the usual help of his brother. Speaking of his brother, Saken was experiencing a similar lack of success against Inuzuka and his mud. He could not afford to suppress himself here at all. He focused on Jujito with renewed energy, anticipating his attacks the best, because he could while staying just ahead of his bumps and cuts. He was looking for an advantage that would allow him to reach a temporary standstill. It took him a while and came close to passing several times, but he finally found it. He slid to the side of one of his attacks, throwing his forearm to block the second cut. He turned her hand, gripping her wrist securely as his free hand grabbed the other by the elbow. Yujito arched an amused eyebrow. "You've already seen my strength, Thendrali, you know that you can't keep me for long." Yukon just smiled. And then, to Yujito's surprise, it seemed to flow towards her. She gasped in surprise, feeling a subtle pain that was beginning to spread through her body. "How are you feeling?" Yujito jumped surprised to hear Yukon's voice right in his ear. She turned her head to the side and was greeted with the unpleasant sight of Lotanen's head protruding from her right shoulder. His left hand reflexively raised, claws open, as he tried to skin Yukon's face. But it got into his shoulder again before his hand could reach it, and soon it slowly came out of his left shoulder. She grimaced as she heard his sinister laugh in her ear. "You'll have to do better than that." "What the hell did you do?" He laughed again, the sound squeaking in his ear. "It's another one of our special abilities. In our level 2 forms, we can merge with the bodies of our opponents. Once we do that, we can harm our enemies from the inside. There is no type of training that can increase one's durability. Internal organs, so they are at our mercy. However, I wouldn't worry too much. Orochimaru-sama wants you alive, so I'll make sure to knock you out." Do you mean that you are inside me and sharing my body? Yes. Yujito shuddered slightly. Well, I certainly feel violated. I have news for you. Naruto-kun is the only guy I plan on letting in. On me, and not for a few years to come. So I'm afraid I have to kick her. Go away. He heard that infuriating laugh again, and how about you? But Yujito was tired of listening to him, and in a quick movement, he ran his claws through the inside of his wrist. She heard a cry of pain. Yukon instantly got out of her, and staggered away, while clutching her bleeding wrist. What were you thinking about? Yujito didn't even stop, applying pressure to his wrist with his free hand, as Chikara no Toremu came to life. Her kick caught the Otonin in the sternum, and she felt a cruel pleasure at hearing something crack as he flew away. I heal pretty quickly, so I can afford to take a little excessive damage in a pinch. Can you afford the same? Yukon grimaced, both from the pain in his chest and from his words. He could also benefit from accelerated healing, but only as long as he was assimilated to Saken. Then he hit him. Yujito had been doing a masterful job of keeping him away from his brother, but he had made a mistake with that last kick. He had been powerful enough to send it to fly, and she had sent him towards Saken. He wasted little time taking advantage of the opportunity, rolling on his feet and climbing up to where his brother fought the Inuzuka. Yujito cursed under his breath upon realizing his mistake and immediately ran after Yukon in pursuit. But she was too far away. Saken pulled away from Kiba as Yukon approached him, desperately throwing himself forward. Yukon reached out his hand as he approached, grabbing his brother's wrist. He disappeared almost instantly, merging with his brother once more. Saken fell to the ground, into a somersault, and was on his feet in a split second. As soon as he recovered, he turned to the side, avoiding Yujito's quick kick. She did not let the lady stop her, and immediately jumped off her planted foot and turned to align her heel with Saken's chest. But Yukon's arm reached out from Saken's chest and caught his calf. Yujito's eyes had a split second to open in surprise before Saken attacked. He was still clutching his injured arm with his free hand and didn't have enough time to lift either arm and block. Both of Saken's arms reached out, hitting his chest like hammer blows. The force behind the blows caused her to fall backwards, sliding along the stony ground for quite a distance. Before she managed to get to her feet, Kiva landed next to her in a squat, to Kamar loitering in front of the wall. In a protective way. What happened to your arm? Do you have some kind of jutsu that allows you to merge and damage another body? I thought the best way to fight him was to force him out by hurting myself. Anyway, I heal quickly. How long will it take to heal? I'm afraid it might be too long now that they've merged again. We may need something drastic to stop them or end things right away. Kiva smiled. I think I have the perfect move. Do it, Akamaru. Akamaru barked once in response, then jumped into the air and went into a flat spin. Yujito watched with interest, wondering what trick Kiva had up his sleeve. Then the dog started peeing. He watched in disbelief as the golden liquid splashed onto Saken before fixing Kiba with an incredulous stare. That's it, that's your plan to finish so fast. Kiba rolled his eyes as Akamaru landed next to him. The Inuzuka boy was already going through a series of seals. No, that's the preparation for my idea. Then Kiba's jutsu shot out with a huge cloud of smoke, temporarily obscuring the heart of sight. When the smoke finally cleared, Yujito was much more impressed. Kiba and Akamaru seemed to have taken a leaf out of Saken and Yukon's book. The shinobi and his dog merged into one body. But while the twins simply joined their bodies and remained the same size, Kiba and Akamaru had transformed into a large two-headed canine, one that towered over all the shinobi present. There is a new attack available to us in this form, one in which we turn so fast that we can't see anything. So, to prepare, we need to make sure that we mark them with a scent that we can trace. I see. But that doesn't make it any less disgusting. The two-headed dog rolled his eyes, which Yujito found quite interesting. Cats are always so prissy. Then, the monstrous canine tensed up and lunged forward. Garuga. The beast suddenly lunged forward, making a quick turn as it accelerated towards its strange opponent. Saken simply jumped to the side, thinking that something moving in the air wouldn't be able to change its direction enough to hit him. He was wrong. Either by manipulating the chakra or maneuvering his body to alter the airflow around his rapid spin, Kiba and Akamaru were able to quickly turn to the side. Kiba felt that he was crashing into Saken. He felt that the body was separating under the force of the twist. But he also noticed something else: there was no blood. He landed on the stone floor as he exited the turn, his claws digging furrows in the ground. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at Saken and Yukon, separated once more. I see, you split up again to keep me from tearing you apart. But that won't work twice. With that, he leaped forward again, writhing in his devastating attack once more. Yujito's eyes immediately fixed on Yukon's bloodied wrist. He had healed, and he had done it faster than hers. Then she saw his thumb slide through the blood on her wrist. A movement that only made it easier to recognize the distinctive series of stamps he was going through. The twins hit the ground with one hand in unison, and a giant metal door appeared in front of them. Yujito's eyes widened as she accelerated forward, moving so that the Inuzuka duo was between her and the twins. He knew that Kiba and Akamaru didn't have enough time to deviate to the side this time, and that he would have to do something to prevent Saken and Yukon from taking advantage of the opening that would surely occur. He needed something big, but the tendons in his wrist were still damaged enough to prevent him from using most of his high-powered jutsu. There was one, however, that was available to her. And the amount of chakra that Kiba and Akamaru extract, as well as the one from the newly summoned gate, would prevent the Otonin pair from having a good one. Good idea about your chakra production. She smiled as she began to gather her chakra. This was going to be good. Saken and Yukon smiled as their Rajwoman door rang from the tremendous force of Kiva's knock. It was an impressive shot and left quite a dent in his goal. And if Kiba had slammed the door head first that hard, he'd be out of the fight for quite some time. But then, they felt a sudden surge of chakra above their door. They looked up just in time to see the huge orange-yellow feline jump up. Yujito cautiously walked around the door, looking at the result of his Mu Tower with Hokage. She hadn't gotten as big as Naruto in his fight against Gaara, the fiery-colored cat, maybe half the size of a summoned boss. However, it was enough to get the job done, as evidenced by the 2 blood stains under his paws. She smiled, "Good job. Now do you think you will be able to get back into my puddle system and finish healing my wrist?" Her totem smiled, an interesting vision of a giant cat made of chakra. "Sure thing." And then it disappeared, flowing back to Yujito. "You've got to be kidding me." Yujito turned in surprise and saw Kankuro crouched on a rock ledge about 15 meters above the floor of the cavern. "We traveled 3 days by forced march to get to Konoha earlier. Then we left Konoha immediately to help them, only for the fight to end when I get here." To say that Shikamaru possessed an incredible mind was an understatement. His mental prowess, when applied, was possibly the most impressive in all of Konoha, except for his father and Kakashi. He could think of more scenarios in a second than most can think of in a minute. And he'd had several minutes trying to think of a way out of his current situation. But no matter how many scenarios he went through, he couldn't find a way out of this mess. She was completely dependent on her shadow jutsu, and had previously had problems when she tried to restrain her with them from a distance. So he took a chance, hoping that if he let her get close, the greater strength of his jutsu would be enough to subdue her. But his hopes had proved fruitless. Teyuya's brute strength was even more than enough to master his techniques. Letting her get close had accomplished only 2 things. The first of these was to allow him to prolong what seemed inevitable. The second was to give him even less chances once the jutsu failed. Both Teyuya's strength and speed greatly eclipsed his own. When she broke free, he would have no chance to escape, and if she so wished, she could tear him apart with her own hands. I needed a miracle if I wanted to get out of this alive. The funny thing about miracles is that you never knew what form they would take. In this case, it took the form of a furious gust of wind that pushed Tayuya into the depths of the forest without raising a hair. From Shikamaru's head. He jumped up surprised, both by the gust of wind and by the figure that landed on the branch next to him. He turned and saw Tamari crouching on the branch next to him. She smiled. "I never thought I would see someone as smart as you, taken so completely by surprise." He sighed in exasperation. "Would you mind informing me?" Shortly after the Suna forces returned home, the body of our hunt was found in a truck on the outskirts of Sunagakure. Orochimaru killed him weeks before the attack and posed as him to trick our village into helping him during his invasion. Once the Wind Council discovered this, it sent me and my brothers to Konoha to carry out a proposed treaty and provide assistance if necessary. Once we arrived here, Hokage immediately sent us to help bring Sasuke back. Now, what is the situation here? She is primarily a long-distance wrestler. He used to use some summoned ogres that he controlled with a flute, but now he uses it to project audio-based genjutsu. I asked for a summary of the situation, not suggestions. But it is impossible to determine the origin of an audio-based genjutsu just by listening to it. This is the perfect environment for her. It's a big area with over-coverage. You can send us genjutsu all day, and we will do it. I won't be able to find out where he is. Tamari bit her thumb and smeared the blood on her fan. I know how dangerous she can be with those genjutsu, so I'm going to end this quickly. As for where he is, well, frankly, I don't care. She pulled her fan back, giving it a powerful shake. Kuchio Senjutsu. Shikamaru had been waiting for another gust of wind, much like everything he had seen her do with the fan. Instead, a weasel flew out of the fan. One that went through the forest faster than Shikamaru's eye could follow. Shikamaru felt his jaw drop. In a split second, Tamari had decimated hundreds of square feet of forest. The once mighty trees were reduced to splintered trunks and branches, and he could see a Tayuya pinned under a fragment of a tree trunk. That must have weighed hundreds of pounds. He turned to Shikamaru, a smile on his face. "There's no problem there. What do you think about that?" Shikamaru sighed. "Women are problematic." Naruto jumped to the side, following the movement with a crouch and a side turn. Every move was an evasion, as he evaded the cuts of Kimimoro's newest weapon, a kind of sharp whip that had once been his spinal cord. He was forced to get up once more as soon as he got them back, jumping up to avoid a sharp blow aimed at his ankles. Kimimaro just smiled and extended his hand, Yubisaki Tama. Naruto's eyes opened with surprise as Kimimaro's finger bones shot towards him with incredible speed. And I had no way to dodge them while I was in the air. So he settled for the next best option. Activate Mentor 1 Toremu and make himself a ball to protect his vital signs. He braced himself for the impact, but instead he felt something firm envelop him. That was followed by a brief moment of disorientation when he was dragged through the air before touching the ground. Naruto rolled over, stood up and came face to face with Sabaku no Gahara. "What are you doing here?" Orochimaru killed our Kage and manipulated our village into helping him during his attack. When our council discovered the deception, they wanted to negotiate a treaty and sent my brothers and me to the diplomats in case their village needed our help. The Hokage sent, we went out to help in the mission. We felt 3 fights, and my brothers each went to one of them, while I came to help you. Gaara paused for a second, his gaze swept over the battlefield. "Where are you, Asuke?" He ran forward, shot out of the barrel in which he was being taken care of. "And I can't spend it with Kimimaro on the way. I see, I'll take care of this one." "Understood." Then Naruto bowed a little, and his next words were a whisper. "I think he's sick, some kind of lung disease that seems to be bothering him." Gaara nodded once. "I see." Naruto smiled. "Cover me." Then he started running at full speed. Shida and no Toremu accelerated his movement as he crossed the clearing. Kimimaro tried to intercept him, but was cut off by a sand wall before he had even traveled half the distance. The bone user was forced to stop in his tracks, helplessly watching as Naruto sped past him and into the forest. Kimimaro stared at Gaara. "You're interfering with Orochimaru-sama's plans. I'll have to finish this fight quickly so I can get there in time and help Sasuke in his fight against Naruto." Gaara simply folded his arms, fixing Kimimaro with his impassive gaze. Kimimaro stood there for a few moments, matching Gaara's gaze before getting moving. He raised his hands as he carried the bones of his fingers shot out once more. The sand of Gaara was swirling, rising up in front of him and coldly stopping the dreadful bullets. It continued to twist, tighten, and solidify as Kimimaro struck with his sword. The sword sank a fraction of an inch into Gaara's defense. Then, the sand tightened around Kimimaro's sword as he tried to withdraw his sword, keeping it in place. Kimimaro stopped in surprise for a split second, enough time for Gaara's sand to swirl and surround the last Hokage. Gaara's face remained impassive as he raised his hand and clenched his fingers into a fist. "Sabakukyu?" A frown spread over Gaara's usually stoic features as he sensed an unexpected resistance in his arena. His enemy had survived. Gaara let his sand recede slightly, noticing the white layer that had risen beyond the surface of Kimimaro's skin. "So that your bones can protect you from my sand, interesting." Kimimaro's only response was to lunge forward once more, with a bone sword in each hand. This time, he fully committed himself to the graceful and deadly dance of his clan. He moved fluidly around Gaara, his swords weaving a complex pattern that Gaara could barely discern. Despite that, his sand continued to surround him, and stopped every blow before he could get close to the Sunanin. Then, the Gaara sand attacked again. A tendril went towards Kimimaro's face. The last Hokage turned his head to the side, barely avoiding the blow. He was then forced to retreat, backing up in short leaps while staying one step ahead of the Gaara arena. Then sand came out of the ground behind him. Kimimaro saw him, but too late. He had been moving backwards halfway through a jump and crashed into the growing cloud of sand. The sand engulfed the last Hokage immediately, crawling upward despite his struggles. "How? When I arrived, I sent some of my sand underground. It is very simple to use my sand to crush minerals underground and create more sand. This battlefield has been designed for my use. Now, let's see if you can resist my sand again." Kimimaro's eyes narrowed slightly. For a second, Gaara could feel a sudden surge of contempt, anger. Then the boy changed. His skin darkened to an inhuman grayish color, dark marks surrounding his eyes. Several bones came out of Lotanen's back, piercing the sand with ease. Kimimaro tensed up and then pushed. Gaara could feel the Hokage struggling against the sand, then broke through. The last Hokage charged across the open field, the bones sticking out of his back and the long tail wagging behind him, giving the boy a dinosaur-like experience. Gaara frowned and threw a wall of sand, only for Kimimaro to go through it. Gaara's eyes opened slightly from the surprise at seeing Kimimaro cross the sand with such ease. He erected another wall, making it thicker and stronger than before. Simultaneously, he gathered a platform of sand around their feet, preparing to move quickly if the need arose. Kimimaro also crashed into the new sand wall, this time facing resistance while going through it. Finally, he was able to pull through. The sand enveloped him, restricting and slowing him down. His movements even as he advanced through it. However, it was child's play for Kimimaro to make the bony plates rise just below the surface of his skin in this state, protecting him from the crushing effects of Gaara's deadliest threat. He formed a bone spear in his hand as Gaara soared into the air, hurling it with all his considerable strength. The sand of Gaara swirled in front of him once more, coming between the Sunanin and the spear. The spear crashed into the sand, and half of its length protruded from the barrier. Even when Gaara's sand remained in front of him, Kimimaro brought his hand behind his back, grabbing the top of his spinal cord that protruded from the base of his neck. He freed it once more, using it as a chain as he threw it towards Gaara. But his sand imposed itself again, forming a sphere around Gaara as the makeshift chain wrapped around her. Kimimaro grunted under his breath. He was sick of this sand, sick of it enveloping him, sick of him protecting his enemy. He was even sick of the gritty taste of the sand that had gotten into his mouth while he was going through the sand barriers of Gaara. He gave a strong push, pulling Gaara and her sand back to the ground. "I'm getting tired of your sand," he intoned as bones grew in his left forearm. They enlarged, wrapping themselves around each other while forming a powerful spear. "But that won't save you from this." He pushed forward, even as Gaara's arena moved once more, condensing under Kimimaro's blow, and allowing the two fighters to see each other once more. Kimimaro leaned into his lunge, adding his weight as he slowly sank through the Gaara sand. "It's over. Your sand can't save you this time. The sand can be annoying. It reaches everywhere: eyes, nose, mouth." A gentle emphasis was placed on that last word, one that made Kimimaro pause. "I see you understand what I'm talking about. That's strange, isn't it? How sand could get into your mouth while it was closed. Naruto gave me an idea when he mentioned your supposed illness. I've been using that sand covering for you as a distraction, allowing me to put sand in your lungs. Let's see your bones save you from this." Then Kimimaro felt a pain more intense than any other he had ever known when his lungs were shattered by Gaara's grains of sand. He staggered backwards away from Gaara. The last Kagaya let out a harsh cough, spitting blood and sand on the ground. He straightened up, the pain written clearly on his features as he tried to back up towards Gaara. But his strength, weakened by illness and battle, finally gave way. This is how Kimimaro, the last of the Kagaya clan, died. Naruto had little trouble locating Sasuke, even with Lucia's advantage. Whatever had happened to Sasuke in that barrel had awakened his seal, at least temporarily. The pollution practically left a palpable trail through the forest. It wasn't long before Naruto could feel Sasuke's chakra signature. The amount of ground the traitor could cover just didn't compare to what Naruto I could do with Shida and not Toremu. Naruto smiled. It was time to attack his target. Sasuke paused briefly when he reached the edge of a landscape known as the Valley of the End. He was looking at the statue of his ancestor, Uchiha Madara. He had been the first shinobi to defect from Konohagakure. He had been portrayed as a villain in the history lessons taught at the academy, so unstable that even his own clan distrusted him. But maybe that wasn't true. Perhaps the village had also hindered Madara, had held back the most prominent members of the Uchiha clan, just as they had done with the last one. Sasuke snorted in amusement as he jumped across the space between the two statues. The Shaddai had defeated Madara when he tried to leave, but Sasuke knew there was no one left to stop him. Therefore, he was completely taken by surprise when a loose rock on the edge of the statue rose up in a cloud of smoke, revealing Naruto standing there. The young Araki didn't even bother to know his bloodline. He spun once and caught Lucia with a backhand before he had a chance to land, and long before he had a opportunity to react. Sasuke felt his breath leaving him quickly, his body bending around Naruto's fist before he was sent into the lake. Naruto watched impassively as Sasuke splashed into the lake hundreds of feet below. He waited until the Uchiha came to the surface, slowly crawling over the water before speaking. Her voice clearly spread across the distance between the two, but she remained calm and composed. And he still carried the same subtle and deadly threat that he had when he confronted Kimimaro. "You seem lost, Sasuke. If you keep on that way, you will find yourself. You will have to turn around to get to Konoha." Sasuke found himself staring at Naruto's distant figure in disbelief. A slight tremor was present in his voice, shattering his usually stoic demeanor. "How could you pass it so quickly?" Naruto smiled and jumped off the statue. He landed on the water crouched, the waves of the impact spread all over the lake. He straightened up, showing Sasuke a really scary smile. Sure, Gaara had really stepped in to take care of Kimimaro for him, but Sasuke didn't need to know that. "You should know that no slime who would ever crawl up to that twisted nut and call him master could defeat me. Sasuke closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to focus as he tried to ignore the blatant innuendo in Naruto's latest statement. Then he straightened up to look at Naruto once more, the Sharingan rolling in his eyes. No, I need the power it offers so I can kill my brother and avenge my clan. I won't let you stop me. He seems to have the wrong impression that you have a say in the matter. Sasuke started moving while Naruto was talking. Sharingan was spinning as he approached the Kumonin. What surprised Sasuke was that Naruto remained so still and showed no intention of moving until it was too late to dodge his attack. But that's what he thought. Naruto had adopted a position of perfect balance, with the weight evenly distributed and ready to move in any direction. He then waited patiently, not moving until he knew that Sasuke was fully committed to his attack. Only then did Naruto act. He leaned back slightly, making a sudden turn. Sasuke could hardly believe what his precious Sharingan was showing him, even when his fist pierced through the air. He saw Naruto's foot rising from the surface of the water, preparing to attack. But he was completely committed to his drive, and there was no way around it. Naruto's foot caught Lucia on the side of the ribs, connecting with considerable force and sending the young Konoha ninja leaping across the surface of the lake. Naruto paused for a moment, holding his foot in the air before slowly lowering it to the surface of the water. That Sharingan of yours is a powerful tool. It allows you to see any movement, even before it is performed. But you're not fast enough to be of sufficient use to me. Even without the help of my own Kekai Genkai, you can start acting after you have committed to your attack. You can never defeat me like this. Sasuke glared at him, flashing a set of hand seals as the marks from his seal began to spread across his skin. He grabbed his wrist with one hand, and the lightning chakra accumulated in his palm. He charged forward with a Chidori shout. Naruto arched an eyebrow. That was a little more interesting. The first level of Sasuke's seal increased his speed substantially, and the Chidori was one of the most powerful short-range attack jutsu that existed. Still, Naruto mused as he activated his own bloodline, it wasn't bad. Equipped to deal with such a situation. Mentor 1 Toremu came to life when Sasuke shortened the distance. And an instant before the impact, it reassembled itself into countless tiny wind blades. Sasuke's Chidori failed when he encountered Naruto's defense, the lightning chakra that propelled him. Sabo was easily overwhelmed by the wind chakra that held Naruto's technique. Naruto's chest was hit by a simple palm thrust, one that could be ignored with little effort. Instead, he used it to give momentum to another twist. His Chikara no Toremu activated in the middle of his spin, and his backhand landed in the center of Sasuke's chest with crushing force. This time, Sasuke clearly heard something snap as he shot back once more. He jumped a great distance over the surface of the lake before stopping. Then he stood up, panting slightly as he squeezed his bleeding hand. His face contracted into a grimace as he moved his fingers, checking his range of motion. Interesting, Naruto muttered, you can still move your hand. That Chidori must have protected her from the worst of my wind blades. Sasuke just grimaced as he took her hand. This couldn't be happening, it just couldn't. I needed to pass through here, get to Orochimaru's side, get the power I needed. Then he hit him. The power he had just obtained from Orochimaru, that's what it was for. He started laughing. His expression took a sinister turn even as the transformation began. The marks that covered his skin expanded, turning it a uniform, sickly gray color. Her hair lengthened, turning white as it descended. There was a tearing sound as a pair of hand-shaped wings grew from his back. But most of all, he could feel the force flooding his body. This was power. This was what Orochimaru offered him, and that's why he would train with the Sannin at any cost. His crooked smile grew as he looked at Naruto with his Sharingan eyes. He laughed, you see this? That's why I have to go with Orochimaru. Look at the power it offers. Naruto shook his head slightly. It seems to me that you are looking for shortcuts. But there's something you need to realize. There's a reason a shortcut is considered that way, because most people are smart enough not to take them. Otherwise, they would be as it is done. Then Sasuke charged forward, and the two were met with an impressive display of taijutsu. Naruto still had the advantage in speed, but it was heavily mitigated by the predictive capabilities of Sasuke's Sharingan. So the two fought on equal terms for several minutes. Then Naruto pushed Sasuke back with a flurry of fierce punches, taking the opportunity to jump back and get a brief respite. He looked at Sasuke cautiously as he considered his options. Taijutsu combat was dangerous now. Sasuke's Sharingan might allow him to do some damage. That, and he had no desire to show Sasuke more of his style than necessary to prevent him from copying it. He was pretty sure he could beat Lucci to Kanjutsu, but so close to Auto, it would be better to keep his chakra, in case Orochimaru sent them other surprises. Also, I didn't want to give Lucia the opportunity to copy any of that either. There was Toremu with Hokage, but one big enough to ensure victory would also mean a significant expenditure of chakra. That, and it could draw unwanted attention. It was then that he remembered one of the most widespread references in his house. Never throw a lightning bolt when a crib, and it will be enough. That predictive ability of your Sharingan is a pretty useful skill. But it's not the only way to find out what's going to happen. You see, I have a pretty good idea of your fighting style. And I have a firm understanding of your speed as well. I can tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to attack. I'll throw a circular punch to your head. You'll consider bending over, but you won't have the time you need. So instead, you will block. And then I'm gonna kick you in the chest. What followed was a detailed description of a complicated battle by Naruto, with Sasuke looking on with obvious skepticism. Then, Naruto started to get to the end of his speech. Then you will be stuck against that rock wall over there. My claws ready to open your throat if necessary. And you will realize. Naruto paused for a moment, and then darted at full speed. Sasuke smiled as he measured his enemy's approach. Naruto was very wrong. Sasuke had a lot of time to duck, and that's exactly what he did. He waited until the last possible second. Then he bent down sharply at the waist, hitting his face right on the knee that Naruto raised with a cruel savagery. The force of the blow made him straighten up again, and Naruto wasted little time in burying a fist deep into Sasuke's fist. The Uchiha lamented, reflexively started to bend over before Naruto grabbed him by the shirt. The Araki turned around and slammed Sasuke's back against the stone wall of the valley. His claws were in place in the blink of an eye, their sharp edges resting on Sasuke's flapping jugular. And then you will realize, Naruto continued as if nothing had happened, that a ninja's best tool is deception. Now, if you're smart, you'll deactivate that seal of yours, and I'll knock you out. If not, well, Naruto shrugged, I never liked you, and I despise traitors. I won't have any qualms about opening your throat. So it's your decision, but his claws hit Sasuke's neck in warning, do it quickly. Then Naruto felt a startling impact on the side of his head. His grip on Sasuke instinctively loosened, and it was his turn to be sent leaping across the surface of the water. He managed to stand up, cautiously looking at the new figure standing next to Sasuke. Who the hell are you? The figure stood still for a few moments, assessing him before responding. They know me as Zetsu. Sasuke was the next to speak, moving away from the newcomer, while looking at him cautiously. She was definitely a unique figure, with those leaf-like bumps on her shoulders, two-toned skin, and that cape. What are you doing here? Zetsu turned around, fixing Sasuke with what seemed to be an almost bored look. If you're as smart as we've been led to believe, you'd take this opportunity and run. That caught the attention of both Naruto and Sasuke. That strange two-tone voice. It was as if there were two different people in that body. Of course, given the black and white split in the middle of his face, none of the young shinobi would rule out that possibility. Then Sasuke recovered, followed Zetsu's advice, and fled through the valley walls. Naruto growled, immediately chasing after him. Zetsu came between the two, naturally. Naruto simply waited until he got closer, then activated Shida and not Toremu, with all the intention of flying next to the surprised plant-shaped shinobi. It was a tactic that had come in handy for several. But he had never tested her against an enemy of the caliber he was facing now. Zetsu's hand reached out, grabbing Naruto's wrist as the young Kumonin sped past. A quick twist, movement and turn caused Naruto to fly back towards the middle of the lake. He allowed himself a brief moment to marvel at the pitch he had used before going into action once more. A few quick hand signals and a trio of Mizubansin joined him on the surface of the lake. The four Naruto threw a cradle and at their opponent, splitting up in one movement. Pincer as they charged into the fray. Zetsu avoided Kunawi's quartet with ease, dropping them into the water behind him. Then it was time to face the four Narutos. He blocked a punch from the first one who approached from the left, then turned to the right, and disabled one who was running through the seals of his hero no jutsu with a strong punch to the stomach. The next Naruto that pounced on him was thrown into another water clone, causing both of them to be dissipated. He then grabbed the real Naruto, turning him towards the surface of the lake and pinning him in place. Only then did he see something that worried him. Naruto was smiling. There was a sudden burst of water behind the two as a fourth Mizugansin emerged from the depths of the lake. Zetsu released the real Naruto in an instant, advancing towards Mizugansin. But it was too far away. "Hey, traitor!" And with that scream, the Naruto clone threw the crib and that he was holding. Sasuke instinctively turned to look at the clone. And since his Sharingan was still active, he could see everything with perfect clarity. He saw the Kuna and fly through the air, passing inches from his face. But most importantly, he saw the explosive tag wrapped around the handle, saw it sizzle and saw it explode. Then he saw only darkness. Zetsu dispelled the last clone with a heavy blow to the torso, then reached out and caught Naruto by the ankle. As the Kumonin tried to jump on him, another subtle movement of his body sent Naruto flying back to the center of the lake. Naruto grunted at the bottom of his throat as he stood up. Sasuke was still alive and moving, so Sukuna and had not killed him. However, he could only hope that he had injured Lucia, as he was clearly outclassed by the opponent in front of him. I wouldn't get another attack on the traitor Jinub. I probably wouldn't be able to perform another attack if I was dumb enough to try. So he was content to fix his gaze steadily on the newcomer. Orochimaru seems to be sending all his puppets for this one. We are not loyal to Orochimaru, we hate that snake. So why are you letting Sasuke escape? Zetsu paused for a few moments, making sure Sasuke was out of earshot before responding. Our leader believes that Orochimaru's ambitions will lead to his downfall in this case. Besides, Sasuke is of secondary interest to us here. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly, so what is your main interest? We belong to an organization called Akatsuki, who has been watching you for quite some time. I'm flattered, Naruto muttered dryly. Our organization, Zetsu continued as if he hadn't been interrupted, currently has 9 members. And we are quite selective about new recruits. But you and your girlfriend have intrigued us. Akatsuki seeks to bring peace for the world, the peace of the wars that the powers of the shinobi nations have brought to it. Your bloodline and your past with the tailed beasts could be of great help in this noble endeavor. What does my QB past have to do with this? We are gathering the 9 Viju. His power is essential for our goals. Meguru, if not Toremu, came back to life when Naruto took a thoughtful step back. To use the Vihul for peace. Nothing good can come of trying to tame them. They are the pure power of the natural order given form. Will they hate being bent to someone's will as much as the people of the elemental nations hate anyone who uses his power? Or have you not heard about the way the Hinshiriki have been treated since their inception? The bigger picture is being missed. We seek to bring an era of peace and an end to war. The Vihul do not bring peace. They represent the chaos of this world, its raw destructive potential. Hinshiriki. Creating them is an evil that circumstances sometimes consider necessary. It may be the only way to stop those beasts. Anything else, try. To alter those powers any further is madness. Nothing good can come out of it. Are you lost? No. I'm not. I'm not the average shinobi, I just know the basics about Biju. I've been a Hinshiriki, just like Yujido. We've delved as deeply into the history surrounding those beasts as anyone at Kumo. They can be subdued, they can be controlled. But only for a while. A slip, a mistake, a small overlooked detail is all that is needed. Then the beast can break free and all hell breaks loose. In the best case, the beast can be resealed. But when your experiment blows up in your face, you'll have multiple Bijals running rampant. Senhua Sirama couldn't even help you, and I have no intention of being close when it happens. This happens. So you can accept your offer and launch it. I'm not interested. That's unfortunate, but our instructions were to take you by force if necessary. But Naruto had already assumed what Zetsu was going to say, and he was already moving. The extra speed granted to his limbs by Shida and not Toremu may have deprived him of the precise body control needed in taijutsu fights. But it provided unparalleled assistance when he simply needed cover ground. And it had started at a significant distance from Zetsu. Naruto was sure that he would be able to return to the safety of the forest. And once there, he thought that the enhanced chakra suppression granted by his bloodline would give him an excellent chance of avoiding detection. Well, that and as much Saiteki Bunsen as he could form. But no one he had faced could have prepared him for Zetsu. Sure, his mother might have been strong, may be able to fend off an S-class shinobi, but her main strength lay in genjutsu. And she didn't have the physical abilities that Zetsu had. Sure, Orochimaru probably physically surpassed Zetsu, but the snake had only been playing with him in the forest of death. To fight someone who was so completely over him. It was something I had never done before. And that's why he was completely surprised when Zetsu reached the valley wall in front of him. Naruto skidded to a halt, plumes of water spewing from his feet. And then a real concern began to appear. He was hopelessly overcome. He didn't resist a single sentence against Zetsu in single combat, he couldn't run away from him. And he had a feeling that even his totem avatar would turn out to be useless in this situation. The cold reality was that Zetsu intended to take him away, and there was nothing he could do about it. And no one, not the Hokage, not the Hokage, not his mother, not Yujito-chan, would have any idea what had happened to him. Or where he would be. Perhaps for the first time in his life, Naruto felt afraid and felt defeated. But the fate of war can change in an instant, and Naruto heard something that suddenly filled him with renewed hope. The light splash of a shinobi's footsteps was heard as it ran over the water, and the song of 1,000 birds suddenly echoed throughout the valley. Zetsu threw himself backward, a split second ahead of Kakashi's attack. And more importantly, a split second in front of Kakashi's outstretched and lightning-wrapped hand. However, Zetsu was close to the valley wall, and it looked like Chidori would go through him when he hit the wall. But instead, it just melted into the rock and barely slowed down. But Kakashi did not slow down either, and his deadly technique went through the rock with ease, until burying his arm in the cliff up to the shoulder. He then planted his other hand against the cliff face, releasing his arm and taking a moment to notice that he was now covered in blood, before turning to the young shinobi he had saved. "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto let out a deep sigh, obviously shocked by the events that had just happened. "If I'm okay. Fine. We need to get out of here, fast." "But Kakashi-san, he ran away from you and you hurt him. Surely you could take them and come back. And Sasuke can't be far away." Kakashi simply shook his head, starting before Naruto finished speaking. "He fell backwards because I surprised him and got too close with a Chidori. I have little real understanding of his abilities. And besides, the information that Hirai Yasama has gathered about Akatsuki suggests that they travel in pairs. Maybe he can defeat Zetsu, but if he has a partner with the same level of power, he wouldn't have any possibility. We also have to remember how close we are now to Otto. We don't know what Orochimaru might throw at us now. You and your teammates have made a remarkable effort, but we can't afford to keep chasing it. But no. Those who abandon their comrades, traitors, are worse than scoria. Sasuke is no longer worth the risk of getting him back. He sighed. It looks like Orochimaru will get the Sharingan after all. Maybe. I threw a Kuna, and with an explosive note, near his face just before it exploded. I didn't manage to kill him, but the eyes are delicate organs after all. I see, let's go. And with that the two shinobi disappeared from sight, quickly on their way back to Konoha. It was already late when Kakashi and Naruto returned to Konoha. The Chunin guards looked up when they saw the pair of shinobi approaching the gates. Araki-san, your teammate Jifumetoku, was injured when he and Neji fought Kidomaru. Hokage-sama said you'd want to know. Naruto nodded once, and then disappeared with a crackle of static electricity. Kakashi took his copy of Ichika out of his bag as he walked towards Konoha. Tsunade was scheduled to have surgery with Kimichi Choji, so it should be a while before he had to meet with her. And if for some reason she went out early, well, he had a reputation to maintain. Naruto reappeared in the main lobby of the Konoha hospital. The sun he had used didn't even faze the population of a shinobi village accustomed to such displays. He wasted no time in walking over the receptionist's desk. I was told that one of my teammates was hospitalized after his fight. Ah. Yes. Hifumitoku is currently in room 724. His injuries are not considered life-threatening, and Rinsen is currently undergoing surgery to ensure his recovery is complete. I would like to remind you not to use a sunscreen going through the hospital, as chakra fluctuations can disrupt the precise chakra control needed for most medical ninja jobs. Naruto was already walking up the stairs, waving his hand disdainfully. Yes, I know. It's not the first time I've been in a hospital. He climbed the stairs 2 by 2, quickly ascending to the 7th floor. He was not very surprised to see Yujito standing outside the room where Mitoku was being treated. She had started fighting shortly before him, so only since then would she have arrived in Konoha shortly before him as well. And obviously she had been sent to the hospital as well. What's he like? Before she was going to operate, Rinsen told me that she had suffered extensive damage to the muscles of the upper part of one of her legs. Some broken ribs and a mild concussion. So he's a little banged up, but not that much. As bad as any of us after we fought Gaara. Speaking of Genin from Sunagakure, one of them stopped in your fight. As you found out, Gaara met with me and fought Kimimaro so that I could go after Asuke. There was no Kimimaro when we left. You'd better tell me. So the two spent the next quarter of an hour or so catching up on what had happened since they separated. It was near the end of their conversation that the couple felt someone approaching. Someone who was easily recognizable by the traces of demonic chakra running through him. The pair turned to see Sabaku no Gaara turn the corner. Naruto moved instinctively, imposing himself between Yujito and Gaara, while looking at the Hinchiriki cautiously. Sure, he had been helpful during the last mission, but he had proven to be downright bloodthirsty in the past. Maybe he had changed, but Naruto didn't know that. And the idea of being with the crazy and homicidal Gaara I had seen during Chunin exams was not pleasant. The three shinobi stood still for a long moment. The Kumonins' cautious glances met the Suninins' impassive gaze. It was Gaara who finally broke the silence. You seem to distrust me. You almost cost Yujito-chan his life. Gaara looked a little longer. He could have saved yours. I would give my life for hers in an instant. There was another long pause before Naruto spoke again. You helped me on that last mission. But it was just that, a mission. Shinobi can act very differently on a mission than in their everyday life. And from what I've known about you in your daily life, I think we have every reason to be worried. That's why I'm here. When I was fighting against the two of you, after I defeated Jujito, you changed. They became more reckless, took more risks. They put their existence at even greater risk for someone else. It's different because of everything I've known. Naruto paused for a moment, sorting out his thoughts. You mentioned that you grew up alone, living only for yourself. Yes. My family was afraid of me. My father tried to get me killed. The village, which I was supposed to protect, despised me. So I had to find my own reason to fight, my own reason to exist. So I lived for myself. My purpose was to kill. That must have been a tough existence. Yes. Naruto sighed and looked at Gaara. Well, you were right about one thing. A shinobi needs a purpose. With all the death we face, we need something to remind us to hold on to life. But when your purpose is death, well, it's not an uplifting goal. Gaara continued to look at him. I see. So what is your purpose? What are you fighting for? Naruto didn't even hesitate for a moment to reply. I fight to protect Kumogakuer, Kasen, Yujito-chan, everything and everyone I care about. I'm fighting to protect them. These are the people you're fighting for. After the fall of Yujito, you became much more effective in battle. It made me wonder if I was wrong, if my existence was flawed. No one had been able to match me in battle, and I believed that even strength did not come from my purpose. But I started doubting that after you defeated me, and now I wonder if it's your desire to protect that made you stronger. In a way, having people who are important to you, whom you are willing to protect, will not make you faster, will not make you stronger, will not increase your chakra reserves. It has no effect. It's a kind of quantified effect. But it gives you resolution, it gives you a reason to fight. You have described your existence as living to kill, living for yourself. So in the battle you had nothing to gain and a lot to lose. If you value only yourself, you run the risk of losing everything that matters to you in the battle without winning. Possible. But I fight to help my village, to protect those who are important to me. When I fight, I have something to gain, and that gives me determination. I keep my concentration, I fight less conservatively, I fight better. And the advantages are not limited only to the battlefield either. I can't imagine what you've been through, Gaara, and I shudder to imagine what it would have been like for me if the story had been a little different. Because having people who love you, care about you, who are willing to be there for you, it has an importance that I can't even begin to describe. They have an importance that I can't even begin to describe. Gaara nodded. I think I understand. Naruto moved forward, tentatively patting Gaara on the shoulder and hiding his relief when no sand was lifted to block the movement. No, you don't know that yet. But you have realized that it is the best way. Relationships will be built over time. It won't be easy, and it will certainly be frustrating. However, with time, you will manage it. And then you will understand what I am talking about, and you will be much better for it. Gaara stood still for a moment, processing everything Naruto had said. I see, thanks to Reiki Naruto. Then he turned, walking down the hall, around the corner and out of sight. Naruto felt Yujito's hands on his shoulders as Gaara disappeared around the corner, turning him around and pressing him against the wall. Before leaning down to kiss him passionately. She broke up half a minute later, seeing the slightly confused expression on his face. Not that I'm complaining, but what was that for? She sank into his chest, because of what you said and how she remembers everything I love about. She looked at you once. I told you how lucky I am to have found you. Usually, you tend to make a subtle comment about me being silly and that you have to tell me that we are going on a date. She snorted, her expression briefly changing to one of annoyance. You know, sometimes you can ruin a moment. Sorry. She rolled her eyes in exasperation, grabbed his head, and pulled it closer to hers. Just shut up and kiss me. About a day after Naruto entered Konoha once again, a ninja from Konoha entered Kumogakuer. Normally, the Konoha ninjas would have encountered some difficulties. After all, relations between the two peoples were still a little strained. But Jiraiya had always been a man who had traveled a lot and had a special ability to get information that no one else could get. So, when he told the guards at the gate that he had a document that was only for the eyes of the Hokage, they didn't put too much argument. Thus, Jiraiya found himself in a private audience with the Hokage half an hour after his arrival in the village. Well, it was private as long as you didn't count the Ambu quartet standing guard in various hidden places. But the Hokage had at least consented to a silencing jutsu that would keep the content of the conversation between the two older shinobi. The Hokage was currently reclining in his chair, wrapped in his office robe, while his gaze remained fixed on Jiraiya from under the brim of his hat. Well, this is a surprise. How long has it been? 6 years. 5, I think, since that confrontation near the southern border. I hope there are no hard feelings. Of course not. Sometimes missions must be carried out regardless of the circumstances. I must also admit that I am curious about your visit, and it seems unlikely that a hostile approach will make you more talkative. I would even dare to say that it could even make you close your lips. Jiraiya reached into his vest and pulled out a scroll. There are 2 reasons for my visit. The first is to give them this. The Hokage looked at the scroll as Jiraiya held it out. That's a Konoha messenger scroll, meant for a Konoha shinobi. Yes, it was sent to me. A messenger falcon should be on the way with yours right now, but I was closer to Konoha, so I got mine first. The Hokage arched an eyebrow. Are you saying you traveled faster than a messenger hawk? Jiraiya snorted amused. I'm not a Sannin for nothing, you know. I guess. So what was so important that he couldn't wait for a messenger hawk to deliver it? It's the details of what happened when your team helped in the effort to recover Yukia's Asuke. You should have received the message about that by now. Indeed, murmured the Hokage as he opened the scroll. He then spent a considerable amount of time reviewing its contents, making sure to go over every detail. Looks like we got really lucky. Atequeson finished his mission early and managed to reach the valley. We probably would have lost Naruto if he hadn't. He put the scroll down on his desk and raised his head to look Jiraiya in the eyes. But I'm tired of you being shy with me. As much as this document may belong to my village, that is no reason for you to personally give me a copy. Not when you know I will have a copy of my own. Tomorrow. Why are you really here? Hirai already leaned back slightly in his chair. Sharper than ever. All right, I want to train Naruto. You already have it. I'm not talking about sitting here for a month to teach him a new jutsu. I really want to train him, teach him everything I can. And I want to take him out of this village on a 2-year trip. To do it. Let you take him out of the village for 2 years. I'm a little wary of that option. What choice do you have? He indicated the scroll on the desk. Akatsuki wants it, and that group is composed entirely of S-rank nuclear ninjas. One of them already managed to locate Naruto, and if Kakashi hadn't been in the area, he would have found him. They have disappeared without a trace. You've done a good job training him here. He is one of the most powerful shinobi of his age group that I have ever met. But he's not strong enough yet, and he needs to get there, fast. That does not explain why it is necessary to take him out of the village for 2 years to train with one of the Sannin of Konoha. Understandably, I am reluctant to allow him to roam the world for an extended period of time with a foreign shinobi. There are many powerful shinobi in this village who could train the child. But not as I can. His strength comes from the seals. You used a sealing ceremony to give him his Kekai Genkai. And most of that lineage's abilities come from the seals formed on his skin by Meguru Sino Toremu. With Minato dead, I know more about seals than any other living shinobi. If I get a chance to study those seals, I can probably discern things that no one else can. But maybe you want to see those seals so that Konoha can perform the ritual. With what 2 young Hinshiriki? I guess you're right. Besides, if Naruto stays here for those 2 years and is based in Kumo, it's only a matter of time. Until Akatsuki comes looking for him. With the kind of power they have available, an attack on the village itself is not completely out of the question. The question, and his intelligence network, would probably allow them to ambush him outside of Kumo. If Akatsuki comes after Naruto when he's with me, I can just leave him off the face of the earth. They could never find both of us. I know, and that ability you have to disappear also leaves me a little worried. I'll consider it. But You should take Yujito with you too. She will face the same dangers as Naruto. Hirai already nodded. I can accept those terms. Fine. The Hokage walked to a shelf against the far wall, taking out 3 large scrolls from it. In the meantime, I'll let you check out the stamps you mentioned earlier. The black scroll contains details about the ritual, while the blue and orange scrolls contain diagrams of Naruto and Jujito's seals respectively. He sealed the 3 scrolls in a storage scroll before handing it to Jiraiya. Thank you, Hokage Dono. I can only hope that you make the right decision. I'll keep that in mind, Jiraiya, you're fired. The Sannin bowed his head respectfully, and then disappeared in a swirl of smoke and leaves. The Hokage sat down at his desk again, taking out a scroll and writing supplies. He spent several minutes typing, scanning the document once he was done, to make sure he was satisfied. Then, after making sure the ink was dry, he rolled it up and applied several stamps on the outside. That done, he leaned back in his chair and released the silencing jutsu he had placed earlier. Saru? A monkey-masked Ambo appeared almost instantly, kneeling on the floor in front of his desk. Here, Hokage-sama. The Hokage touched the recipient's name on the outer edge of the scroll. I need you to give me this. Make sure that no one but you touches it except the recipient, and that it is not opened until after delivery. Hello, Hokage-sama. Fired. The Hokage smiled to himself as he turned in his chair to take in the village. At least, Naruto and Yujito were certainly going to have 2 interesting years ahead of them. As soon as everyone was healthy enough, Tsunade called all the shinobi sent to fetch Sasuke to her office for a report. No one was in danger anymore, although some seemed decidedly worse for the reluctance. Chuji was noticeably thinner. Apparently he had not yet regained the volume he had lost with the self-consumption pill he had taken. Neji and Maitoku were wearing bandages over the wounds they had received, and neither of them was still able to move with the ease they were used to. Shikamaru's broken finger was splinted, but otherwise he was fine. No one else had been seriously injured. Tsunade was grateful for that and very aware that it was largely due to the help provided by Suna and Kumo. He leaned back in his chair while Naruto and Kakashi. They were concluding their account of the close encounter with the Akatsuki member. Unfortunately, if it weren't for Zetsu's interference, the mission might have succeeded. Naruto, did you say that an explosive note sounded near Sasuke's face? He felt her slightly, yes. How much damage did it cause to your eyes? I'm not sure. Zetsu threw me back into the center of that lake before I could get a good look at it. I know he got caught up in the explosion, but other than that I can't tell you much. If only Orochimaru didn't have such a powerful medical ninja at his service. We'll just have to hope that Orochimaru doesn't have the Sharingan. There's nothing we can do about it now. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out 10 envelopes. For their participation in this mission, everyone will be paid for an A-rank mission. Maitoku frowned, but the mission was unsuccessful. Sasuke managed to escape to Orochimaru. I can't blame you for that. Zetsu's interference meant you were way beyond your means. And the mission was to ensure that Orochimaru didn't get the Sharingan, which Naruto might have managed to do. And to achieve so much against an S-class nuclear ninja is impressive. Besides, I can't send foreign shinobi on such a dangerous mission without paying them. Naruto sighed as he picked up his check, politics. Not that I'm going to complain in this case. Okay Dono, eyes turned to Maitoku as he spoke for the first time since he finished giving his account of the fight against Kidomaru. How long will it be before I am fit to travel? I'm really looking forward to returning to Kumogakure after such a long absence, and I'm sure my team shares my feelings. Tsunade intertwined her fingers, looking over them as she observed the various genin arranged in front of her. You may not have the healing factor of some of your teammates, but Rin did a good job of treating you. You should be ready to travel by tomorrow afternoon. However, many in the village will be sad to see you leave. Many in Kumogakure will be happy to see us return, and that village is our home after all. Naruto and Yujito could only nod their heads. Maitoku had said it perfectly. In Otagakure, Sasuke was not in such a good mood. He was currently lying on an operating table, with bandages around his face and eyes. Kabuto was nearby, cleaning his instruments after completing his operation on Sasuke. Well, the doctor turned to Orochimaru, the newly captured body of his master, wrapped from head to toe in bandages. Sasuke's eyes and face suffered significant damage from the explosive note. The cornea was especially damaged and received some moderate scars, as well as some minor burns. I have transplanted corneas from one of the prisoners, but such operations are complicated, even for one of my abilities. It will take time to determine if I have been able to prevent Sasuke's blindness. Even if he can see again, I'll have to watch him to make sure the new cornea doesn't negatively affect Sasuke's Sharingan. I see. The Sound Five are lucky to have died on their mission. They would have suffered much more if they had answered me for this failure. Kabuto adjusted his glasses. You don't know how much they suffered before they died, Orochimaru-sama. No death in battle could be less painful than the one I can inflict. Of course, Orochimaru-sama. I'm going to kill him. The two older shinobi turned to look at Sasuke, who had just uttered his first words since the operation began 3 hours ago. It was Kabuto who responded by killing whom Sasuke-san. The young Uchiha growled from the bottom of his throat. Naruto, who else? He tried to blind me. Kabuto chuckled. You can hardly blame him. What did you intend to do with that Chidori of yours? That's enough, Kabuto. It's no use getting mad at him. And I don't want any of the Arakas to die. His bloodline is intriguing. And I want to study it at least. Then I will fight him and defeat him. He will be a springboard to get the power needed to defeat Itachi. Orochimaru smiled under his bandages. Well, you haven't lost your drive, your desire for revenge. Yes, and you'd better stick to your plans. Promises. Cuckoo. Don't worry, Sasuke. I will be able to make you stronger than you can imagine. Fine. Orochimaru looked at Sasuke intently, then turned and walked towards the door. Come on, Kabuto, we have a lot to discuss. The two shinobi left the room, leaving Sasuke alone to rest. Kabuto walked down the hallway a short distance, making sure to be out of Sasuke's hearing range before speaking. Sasuke-san says that the shinobi who intervened in the Valley of the End was wearing a black cape with red clouds. He paused for a moment, looking Orochimaru in the eyes. It matches the description of those worn by his former compatriots. Yes, the word dragged on, sounding more like a whistle. That was Zetsu, he's Akatsuki's best spy. Kabuto frowned. I thought that was Sasori's purpose in the organization. Q. Sasori uses seals to create sleeper agents that she uses to get information. It never collects your information directly. Zetsu does it, his talents are especially suited for it. I wish there was another one with those skills. Studying them would be a very welcome opportunity. Kabuto frowned as he continued walking down the hallway. But why would Akatsuki stop Naruto from preventing you from getting the Sharingan? They've been opposing you since your defection, and it's a move that Itachi would surely have opposed. I doubt Itachi-kun knows about Zetsu's interference. Pain wanted to know everything that his subordinates were doing, but he was quite reserved himself. But why did Akatsuki want to help you? They wouldn't. They're obviously planning something. That doesn't worry you, Kukuku. This plan seems to depend on an Innovato gene. I'll make sure to limit what I teach Sasuke-kun, he won't be a threat to me. It was with great relief that Team foresaw Kumogakure once again. They remained on the mountain path for a few moments, contemplating the family views. The Great Wall of Kumo, surrounding the numerous stone buildings that made up its interior. The tower of the Raikage stood strong, the spire braving the elements, as it had done since the village's inception. And you could see the Raikage monument, the sunlight refracting through the stained glass dome, in what must have been a dazzling display for those below. It was Maitoku who broke the silence. We should continue, it looks like a storm will arrive later that day. Naruto adjusted the way his backpack rode on his back as he went. A storm hits at some point almost every day. But I really want to come home. We spent too much time in Konoha. You should get used to being away from Kumogakure for extended periods, Akana said. As you progress in rank and ability, they will be assigned to you. More and more missions that will require an extended absence. It doesn't mean we have to like it, Yujito muttered when Megurus and not Toremu appeared in his skin. We just have to get used to it. And I, for one, think it's time to speed up our arrival as much as possible. She looked at Naruto. If I beat you at Kumo, tonight you will invite me to my favorite restaurant. He looked at her suspiciously, activating his bloodline as well. But that's the most expensive place in town. She smiled, then maybe you want to hurry. Then the two of them were off, Shida and not Toremu glowing around their limbs as they sped down the mountain paths towards their home. Maitoku shook his head, the most powerful shinobi of his time in all of Kumogakure, and sometimes they still behave like children. Oh, let them have fun. Relaxing with those you care about is one of the things that helps people stay sane in this line of work. Akana and Maitoku proceeded to take the road at a more leisurely pace, arriving at the village walls much later than the two young Arakas. Akana looked at the two of them for a second before speaking. Well, who won? Yujito snorted in annoyance. Your son got me out of the way. Naruto rolled his eyes. What he forgets to tell you is that he tried to trip me up while we were running down the road. I avoided it, and the resulting position prepared me well for one of the simplest throws we know. So I decided that if she was going to try to slow me down, I could do the same. You got me out of the way. You have a twig stuck in your hair. She frowned as she released him. That's your fault. Akana rolled her eyes. You're arguing for the sake of arguing. Let's go back to the village. The two Arakas stood up as the team started walking around the village walls. The main gate of the village was located on the far side of the road to make things more difficult in case of invasion. It was surely a minor deterrent, but Kumo's builders had been smart enough to take advantage of every advantage they could while building the village. When they arrived at the doors, they were signaled to enter without much trouble, although the guards congratulated both Naruto and Yujito for his promotions. The team split up after entering the village proper, each heading to their respective houses. One could get quite dirty in the course of several days of hard travel, and each of them was looking forward to washing off the dirt that they had accumulated along the journey. Naruto showered as soon as he got home, enjoying the warm water while he cleaned up. Then he used the water from the shower along with a simple sutonjutsu to clean his vest. Now that I was back in the village, I would have to buy some extras and embroider them to match the current one. Until then, he assumed that he would have to keep cleaning the one he had. He frowned slightly when he felt an unknown chakra signature appear outside his bathroom door. She pulled a crib Y out of her bag, hiding it inside her towel as she dried her hair and poked her head out the door. She blinked when she came face to face with the stylized panther mask of the Ambo waiting outside her door. Arakasan, Reikagesima has requested your presence in his office. Although I'm sure he won't mind if you finish your bath. I'm almost done. It should only take a few more minutes. All right, I'll inform Reikaige-sama. And in a crackle of static he disappeared. Naruto sighed as he went back to the bathroom and finished getting dressed. He had thought that the Reikaige wanted to talk to him and his team, but he hoped that they would have a little time before the Reikaige would have enough time to meet with them. He concentrated briefly after finishing, noticing that Akana was no longer in the house. She should have left by now. Tying his Itate back in place, he walked out the door on his way to the Reikaige Tower. This time, he paid a little more attention while walking through the streets, noticing the reactions he got from the people on the streets. The admiration of the people here was much more cautious and respectful than in Konoha, but that had always been the case here. What I was looking for was how they treated him now that they had had a little time to adapt to the news of your sponsorship. And, to tell the truth, I didn't see much difference anymore. The reactions had been varied and, in some cases, violent, shortly after the news reached Kumo. But it seemed that the villagers had calmed down since then, and that things were now returning to the status quo. He smiled. It was good to be back home. He was ushered to the top floor of the Hokage tower almost as soon as he arrived. When he arrived at the Hokage's office, his secretary asked him to wait outside, where Akana was also taking a seat. He sat down next to her. "We are waiting for Mitoku and Yujito." "Only Yujito, Mitoku won't come." "Who told you that?" "No one, at least not with words. But I didn't survive that long, as I couldn't read body language and facial expressions." Naruto frowned. "Why isn't Mitoku coming? Do you think the Hokage would want him here for the mission report?" "I don't think we are giving a report of our time in Konoha. And as for why Mitoku isn't coming, I have absolutely no idea. The secretary of the Hokage can hide some things." Said secretary raised her head and shot Akana an annoyed look. "Your support is very much appreciated." Akana smiled happily, ignoring the dry sarcasm in her voice. "You're welcome." Yujito took another 15 minutes to arrive. The two kumonin who were already waiting passed the boring time. After a couple of days traveling together, they didn't have much to talk about so soon after his return. When Yujito finally arrived, Naruto shot him a slightly annoyed look. "What took you so long?" "The Zambus said I could finish bathing and freshen up." Naruto sighed. "You do realize that the Hokage is being polite, right? When an Ambo tells you that the Hokage would like to meet with you, he usually means immediately, or close to that." She shrugged. "I was told I could finish making myself presentable." He sighed and then looked at the secretary. "Can we come in now?" Yes, the Hokage said that once they were all here, they could come in. Akana grabbed Naruto's shoulder to prevent his initial movement towards the door. "The team leader goes first, Naruto." Naruto slightly narrowed his eyes. "I've never heard that rule before." "It's like I'm entertaining you a little bit more for no better reason, to bother you a little bit." Naruto rolled his eyes and took his hand off his shoulder, walking through the double doors towards the Hokage's office. Like any good shinobi, he caught all the obvious features of the room at a glance. The one who surprised him was Jiraiya, casually lounging on one of the couches pressed against the walls on the side of the room. "Iris Inin, what are you doing here?" Jiraiya sat up very hurt. "How many times have I told you not to call me that, Gaki?" Akana entered behind Yujito and closed the door behind her. "Well, if the glove fits." Jiraiya shot him a dry look. "I see where he got that from." She smiled. "I did the best I could. However, my son raises a good question. What are you doing here?" He forced a smile, and the assembled shinobi felt a hint of nervousness as he looked at Akana. "Well, I'll be taking Naruto and Yujito on a training trip for about 2 years." The reactions were slightly varied. Slight surprise on the part of the parked Ambu who had seen Jiraiya in his previous conversation with the Hokage. Shock on the part of the two Arakas, and a subtle undercurrent of anger on the part of Akana, who took half a step forward. "What was that?" Jiraiya swallowed, and then looked at the Hokage. "A little help here." He shrugged. "This was your idea." Well, Zetsu's interference proved that Akatsuki is actively trying to recruit Yujito and Naruto. So they need to become stronger. "Are you implying that my lessons are inadequate?" She sighed. "You specialize in genjutsu, not ninita and jutsu that they seem to favor. I can also analyze the stamps of your Kekai Henkai, probably better than anyone. And they need to be able to disappear off the face of the earth. If Akatsuki comes after them. You can't do that in Kumo, you can do that if you're with me. Oh, to be able to disappear with my students. One of which is my son. That certainly puts my mind at ease." She turned to look at the Hokage. "I can't even believe you're allowing this. Letting them roam the elemental countries for 2 years with only one foreign shinobi." The Hokage leaned back in his chair, looking at Kana from under the brim of his hat. "I'm not." "What? What? So what?" Jiraiya stood up indignantly. "But you said." The Hokage interrupted him. "I said you could take the two of us on a 2-year training trip. I never said I'd let you go with them alone." Akana nodded. "Ah. Then you will send me to them." No, actually, I need you here. She frowned, so who are they? She was interrupted when the doors behind her opened at the perfect moment, crashing into the walls with a resounding boom. An Ambu came to a Reikyo with a monkey mask and said that the Hokage was looking for me. So let me introduce you. Kirabi. There were several seconds of stunned silence as the occupants of the room watched the newcomer's appearance. He was an imposing figure, tall and very muscular. His dark skin contrasted sharply with the Kumo shinobi vest he was wearing. The bracelets on his forearms were a similar color to the vest, and 7 swords were strapped to his back. No one could deny that he made an impressive figure, although his arrival was somewhat undermined by his poor rhymes. Akana finally broke the silence. You've got to be kidding me. What are you trying to do? Turning my son into a kinky wannabe rapper. Hey, my rhymes aren't bad, my rapping skills are crazy. Akana rolled her eyes. I rest my case. Kirabi was about to retort when the Hokage intervened. The two of you can discuss the speech patterns later. We have more important things to discuss right now. He moved slightly, fixing Kana with his gaze. Looks like you have reservations about this trip. Reservations would be an understatement. Even if you leave him, she motioned to Kirabi, he moves on, you will still send my son away for 2 years. Do you really expect me to agree to this? Your concern is touching, Yujito murmured dryly. Akana's features softened instantly. I wouldn't want you to leave either, Yujito. This situation is just overwhelming, the Hokage said, I know. But Hirai is already right. With a group like Akatsuki showing interest in them, steps should be taken to ensure their safety. I understand that you may not like this choice, but I have determined that it is the best option. For the village, for Yujito, and your son. But, Akana, she shuddered at his tone in spite of herself. It was sharper than any he had used on her in a long time, since his days as her student Genin. You may not particularly like this situation, but my decision is made, and it is final. Her voice softened. I know this will be difficult for you, but I made the decision for their sake. Akana actually lowered her eyes at that, a little reprimanded. She sighed before answering, Yes, Hokage-sama. I get it. Then his whole behavior changed. He turned and the fire flashed in his eyes as he pointed his finger at Jirala, but you turned to look at Kirabi, and you. If my son comes back as a perverted aspiring rapper, I swear I will castrate you. And use the pieces to muffle your screams while I rip out your tongue. Jirala took a half step back and raised her hands defensively in front of him. Kirabi just frowned, there you have to disprove my rhymes. Akana simply looked at Kirabi, who wisely fell. The Hokage also added his gaze. I am sure that these two renowned shinobi will be able to curb their vices around their young wards. It's not like that. The two shinobi exchanged quick glances. None of them, despite their considerable power, was willing to try to defend their precious habits here. Instead, they simply nodded before speaking in unison there, Hokage dono Barasama. Well, you will live tomorrow at 8 a.m. Fired. Naruto, Yujito and Akana left immediately. Hiraya and Kirabi stood still, and it was quite easy to tell that they both wished to talk to the Hokage. The three bit their tongues for several minutes, waiting for the trio to get out of hearing range. Hirai was already the first one to talk. You never said anything about sending another shinobi on the trip. I never said anything about sending you, just not either. It's not a risk I'm willing to take. I want one of my own shinobi to be there too. Also, you were the one who told me that Akatsuki members usually travel in pairs. Neither Naruto nor Yujito can take on an S-class ninja now, but Kirabi can. And you may need it. If Naruto's safety is really your priority, you will travel with him. Otherwise, I will send them with only Kirabi instead. Jiraiya frowned and crossed his arms over his chest. Why didn't you tell me about this before? There are many reasons for my actions, some of which I would like to reveal. So, are you still going to train them or not? Jiraiya nodded laconically, yes. And then disappeared in a swirl of smoke and leaves. The Hokage turned to look at Kirabi. I can probably guess why you're still here. Kirabi crossed her arms over her chest and dropped her rhymes in a rare moment of seriousness. I already have students. I know. I've had them since they were genin. Yeah, I know. How long has it been? 5 years. Yes. They are more than ready for Jounin exams. They have been for more than a year now. He has done a wonderful job, and he has every right to be proud of them. But it's time for them to move on. You told me yourself that they have mastered everything you can teach them. That they won't be able to use Kenjutsu the same way as you. Yujito and Naruto, however, may be the most suitable for it. If Hireya's suspicions about his abilities are correct, they may be able to surpass you in it. And I want them to learn how to subdue Vihulu with their bloodline, if that is possible for them. You're the only Hinshiriki we have. But above all, I need someone I can trust completely. And the shinobi available to me that I can trust unconditionally are very few. Even fewer are the ones who are powerful enough to help Jiraiya in case he needs it, and all but one I need in Kumo. I need you to do this for me. The two stood there for a few long moments until Kirabi finally nodded. I see. He then turned and headed for the door. Where are you going? Killer Bee had won in town last night. You know things are bad. The Hokage sighed, leaning back in his chair and calling to the muscular figure. Remember, at 8:00 in the morning. Try not to have a hangover. Naruto returned home with Akana, where instead of unpacking as he had planned, he found himself packing even more of his possessions. In preparation for the journey ahead, he was pleasantly surprised when a genin team handed him 6 Kumo shinobi vests, all embroidered exactly like the one he was currently wearing. Akana mentioned that she had sent copies of the design to Kumo via a messenger falcon, so that the Asters could have the vests ready at the time of their delayed arrival. Speaking of Akana, she was pretty clingy for the rest of the night. Not that Naruto could really blame her. Since the Hokage had placed Naruto under her care, she had limited the number of long-term missions she had been sent on. They had never been apart for more than a month, and she had only had 4 missions of that duration. In the 10 years she had been raising him. Being separated for 2 years was going to be a new experience for both of us, and something that also had him a little worried. Although her nervousness only made Akana's reluctance to allow Naruto to leave her line of sight for the rest of the night a little less intolerable. But the night flew by, and before they knew it, they were at the Kumogakure main gate, along with Mitoku, Yujito, Kirabi and Hireya. The last two stayed quite a long way behind, giving their new wards the opportunity to say goodbye. Akana currently had Naruto wrapped in a tight hug. I'm gonna miss you. He smiled sadly. I know, I don't really want to be apart for so long either. It will take me some time to get used to it. Akana straightened up, resting her hands on her son's shoulders and looking into her eyes. These 2 years are going to change you. They are quite tumultuous even under normal circumstances. But don't let them change you too much. Remember what you have learned, where you came from, and, above all, who you are. Stay true to yourself. I know what happens. I'll remember that, Kaizen. She bent down, pushed his Itate away, and kissed him on the forehead. I know you will make me proud. She smiled when Akana came over to talk to Yujito, when I won't. She chuckled, you have a good point. Then Mitoku came over to talk to Naruto, and the two stood there awkwardly for a few moments. So, Naruto began, it looks like the team is going to split up. I guess it was inevitable that there would be a reorganization after his promotions. But I didn't expect our interactions to decrease so much. Naruto shook his head in amusement, even now. You distance yourself from your emotions as much as you can. Remember, as long as you can control them, they are a source of strength. And don't slack off while we're gone too. I still want to have the chance to fight alongside you when we get back. The edge of Mitoku's lips arched upwards in a smile, and he extended his hand towards Naruto, until we meet again. Naruto's smile widened as he suddenly leaned forward, pulling Mitoku's hand away and capturing him in a tight hug. He chuckled, ignoring Mitoku's indignant babble. He slapped his teammate on the back as he walked away, still chuckling. "I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do when we get back." And then he turned, walking towards where Kirabi and Hirai were already waiting. But then, he suddenly stopped and heard something for the first time. Mitoku was laughing. Naruto spun on his heels and arched an eyebrow curiously. Mitoku's smile got a little deeper. "Yujito told me that you would do that." Naruto shook his head, turning around and resuming his walk towards the two men who would influence his life so much for the next 2 years. For better or for worse. Yujito started walking behind him, his hands unconsciously joining. And then the couple faced their future. However, it wasn't long before they were wondering what the future held for them. They had reached a city in 3 days of quiet travel. Soon after, the two older shinobi rented a hotel room and prepared to leave. Yujito was tapping his foot, with an expression of disbelief plastered on his face. "Let me get this straight. We won't even leave Kumo for 3 days, we're in the first village we found, and you're already leaving us to go to a bar." Hirai already shrugged. "Hey, we'll be close enough in case something happens." "Didn't Reikage-sama tell you something about keeping an eye on your vices? Hey, going to a bar won't turn you into a pervert or make you start rapping. Especially since you'll be here. Just don't do anything that I wouldn't do while we're gone." Naruto snorted funny from where he was lying on the couch. "Is there anything you wouldn't do if you were alone in a room with a girl?" "Well, there's one thing where Memef." The 3 Kumonins appeared in front of Jiraiya instantly, with their hands on his mouth and slashing him. "I really don't think we want to know," Naruto muttered. Yujito's words were a little less reserved, and his gaze was icy as he looked at the Sannin. "Naruto-kun is right, we don't want to know. And if you continue, I will make sure that you are physically incapable of doing so. And since I don't know what it is, I guess I just have to be very thorough in my work. Do you understand?" Hirai already nodded nervously, and the Kumonin took a step back. However, he regained his composure almost instantly and turned to address Kirabi. "Now, don't try to rap at the bar, you'll scare all the women away. Hey, girls love Kirabi rhymes, that's why I make them all the time." Jiraiya moaned in frustration as the two disappeared down the hallway. Naruto turned to Yujito. "It's going to be a very long couple of years." For shinobi were advancing along the mountain paths towards the distant village. For 3 of them, it was the first time they had seen their home in more than 2 years. And it had been an interesting couple of years full of adventures, training, and not a little frustration. And while the 2 older shinobi had remained essentially unchanged, it wasn't necessarily the same with their young ones in charge. Naruto had definitely changed. His way of dressing was very similar to the one he had had when he left. Embroidered vest, navy blue shinobi pants, and shoe abstinence. Although someone who knew him quite well from before his trip may have noticed that the symbols decorating the edges and seams of his vest were slightly different than they had been. Her hair still had the same length and style, still held by her eye tight. But he had grown up. He had reached a height of 5 feet 10 inches, an accelerated growth that was only now beginning to decline. His muscle tone had never been bad for a child,